Hello everyone, I'm Oindrila. I'm from NextSense, and today I will be talking about energy management, information systems, and landscape, and the landscape context that we are in. So the whole real estate industry is going through urgent need to decarbonize the buildings. There's this huge need for it, and it comes from regulatory pressure and also tenants requesting more decarbonized or low carbon spaces because everybody has to meet their ESG goals. Global warming is real, and therefore, in order to be able to meet the targets and to abide by the company's own agendas, everybody is seeking for a low carbon space. So, in order to understand why people are requesting decarbonization, it's also important to understand what is driving this whole phenomena. And in order to explain that, I would like to go into the next step or introduce the landscape context, which are basically driving companies towards decarbonization. You can first of all see there are multiple reports and financial reports that have come in, and we can see for the top 100 real estate investment trusts, everybody, almost 100% of them are reporting on their ESG goals. Out of them, 83% have clear sustainability goals in 2022, and at least 73% have set their carbon targets. Most of these rate funds have a large market capitalization, especially from the US. But also, if you look and focus more towards the EU and look on a smaller scale, just the real estate companies by themselves, in EU you can see that 31% of the total listed real estate companies everybody has are basically reporting on all three scopes for ESG and net zero targets. Well, the scopes, by that I mean scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. And EU is, on a smaller scale per real estate company, is leading the pack there. And why are people doing it? It's primarily because of regulations. And also from a financial perspective, because there has been different regulatory frameworks available that requested or that the framework basically asked for specific real estate companies to follow certain low energy framework or the climate agenda. But until and unless it became more of a financial constraint or a by law, that's what actually made the whole flywheel of transformation rolling. So you could see if you actually trace back just to where this came from and what are the different major events and regulations in the climate agenda that affected the real estate industry from a financial perspective, where they had to start really reporting on financially. That started in 2015 with the UN developmental goals. Then over time, as you could see, by 2019, the EU taxonomy, the European Green Deal, all of these things were already started to take place. These regulations and standards came into action. And then by 2021, 2023, the CSRD reporting, taxonomy act, all of these, a Paris proof commitment really came into place. They became like a proper law or act that really forced, it was not a recommendation anymore, but more like an act or a law, which every company had to abide by. And that really made the ball or let the ball rolling. But there are so many different, as you can see here, there are different kinds of nomenclatures or legal frameworks and rules available. But how do we differ or like differentiate between each other, and what really started the ball rolling in the real estate sector. That we can explain by the EU sustainability reporting landscape. There are three main mandatory EU regulations and framework that has really forced different companies to work through the sustainability reporting. It's not just a requirement, it's just really mandatory to report now, and that has woken up every company. So to begin with, there is the EU taxonomy, then there's the CSRD and the SFDR. The EU taxonomy is a clear, detailed classification system for sustainable activities, and which basically has multiple objectives. They basically, any company who is can report or are eligible to report on their or have to report on their ESG requirements. It basically gives a good basis or an understanding of the different environmental objectives. So climate mitigation, climate change adaptation, sustainable use of water and marine resources, circular economy, pollution prevention and control, and biodiversity. So basically, any company who wants to report on their sustainability objectives can use this specific classification system to actually understand where can they actually report on or eligible to report on, and then use that as a guidance or a framework to develop their own ESG agenda. Now, once you have identified the different key frameworks and pointers that you would like to report on, EU taxonomy feeds into CSRD and SFDR. So these two are the two main financial instruments which are extremely important or has become an act or a law, and it's mandatory for companies which are has more than 250 employees or more than 40 million turnover. They have to report on CSRD and SFDR. These two are financial instruments, and in order to report on the sustainability performance of the company against EU taxonomy, you have the CSRD. And then for asset managers and institutional investors, they typically also report if you want to be a green investment and to avoid greenwashing, if you want to really transparently showcase that you're investing and working with towards sustainability, you do this SFDR reporting. And this is how the three main key regulations and framework work. Basically, EU taxonomy feeds information towards CSRD and SFDR, and also these three trinity, if you will, you can call them. They are also linked, of course, to your environmental sustainable ESG reporting, and that primarily happens on the CSRD side, where you have 5 pointers or more, five or more different pointers or scope under CSRD, which is related to ESG, and you can report on your ESG criteria under CSRD using those pointers or criteria. So here now you can understand how we have, so this is basically the EU sustainability reporting landscape that is relevant at this point in the EU. And we can also see how it is related to the overarching initiative of ESG. But also, how does it relate towards the whole pathway for decarbonization? So we have these different tools, right? Like EU taxonomy, SFDR, CSRD, but how are we using the different tools and everything else? For example, EPBD, NZEBS, or CREM, or Paris Proof. These are different terminologies that we always hear about. So how do these different terminologies help to achieve decarbonization? This is a great tool to show you. So first of all, now it's already an act. You have to report on CSRD and SFDR. In relation to that, on a building level, using EPBD, you have to showcase that if you're an existing building stock, you have to showcase that you're going towards Paris proof, or you use different kinds of NZEB or zero energy building or nearly zero energy building. You try to become a nearly NZEB or ZEBs. Otherwise, you also have different frameworks like SRI, that is Smart Readiness Assessment Index, or BRP. These are different ways or framework which you can use to ensure that your building is qualifying to achieve or is on path to achieve zero emissions, to be zero emission by 2050. Then by 2025, every building, all eligible buildings required to provide some kind of a climate pathway, and they have per country. So for example, in the Netherlands, there's DGBC, and you have to comply to Paris proof, or you have to make your building Paris proof, or any renovation that you take place, you want to comply by Paris proof and CREM. And then that is a obligation by 2025. By 2030, we also see that EU taxonomy will already integrate life cycle analysis. So you can see step by step, it's increasingly becoming stricter and more ambitious in terms of energy conservation strategies. And by 2030, it's also looking into integrate the whole life cycle analysis for carbon, at the core of as a core of its criteria. And then by 2040, it requires that any building that you own or acquire, they have to be a net zero during operation. If they are not net zero in operation, you have to classify that building as significantly harmful, and of course there are certain limited exclusions would apply to it. But then you would have to really, as you can see, your asset definitely gets stranded if it is not zero carbon in operation by 2040. But as you can see, this is the whole decarbonization pathway, and there are these different agendas or frameworks and acts or laws that come into place throughout this timeline of 10 years, more than 10 years, sorry. And EU policymakers and the built environment sector are working together by implementing these acts, different frameworks, and commitments to ensure that all buildings in the EU are fully decarbonized by 2050. And this whole process of having different policymakers making more stringent climate targets, investors and insurers, this basically affects investors and insurers or people who are investing in green investments, because they have to report on all these different financial instruments to showcase that they are truly being green and they are working towards becoming green and more sustainable. That affects tenants, because if you're a very large tenant, you have to report on your CSRD or your other directives and other frameworks, because you're already a large enough organization, and then they have their own carbon targets, as we already saw, and therefore they have much more. They have requests from developers for much higher quality spaces, zero carbon spaces. And then there's this whole thing that keeps going on, because tenants seek, so policymakers make it further stringent and have more tougher climate targets and so on. This market transformation is slow, but it has started to gain the traction that we wanted to gain, and it's now moving. And now that it's moving, we know it's now picking up speed. It took some time, but it's on the right path. And you can see that because of this market transformation flywheel working, companies are also working towards that. Here you have certain indicators. So for example, you see companies that are already reporting on their ESG goals, per year they have actually improved on their energy, water, and GHG intensity. So, for example, overall, this is for the EU. The energy intensity from 2018, 2019, and 2020, you can see it has consistently reduced. It's the same for water intensity as well as carbon. So that is that's great news. And it also showcased in just starting to report on things, the next step is always improvement. And there's also a lot of evidence that tenants and consumers are also just demanding low carbon spaces. So the green premiums across global market for high quality, sustainable, low carbon spaces, people are willing to pay a higher premium for that, specifically for EU. A representative as London here. Different case studies from JL reports have showed that people pay more, and we also see that there's a high demand for really good quality low carbon spaces. There's a demand, as you can see on the side, of 3.9 million square meters, and currently whatever is being in construction, there's only a supply of 1.7 million square meters. So as you can see, there is a 57% unmet demand in EU itself for top spaces, or like really good green sustainable spaces in the country, in the EU. So we have a huge market or a gap that needs to be fulfilled. So here we can see that it's not only the new buildings that can supply this, which is always harder, but also the renovation. The existing buildings there's a huge market for renovation to update the older buildings or existing building stock to supply for this remaining 2.2 million square meters. So how do we get to deliver these low carbon spaces? So first of all is gathering the data. So first, getting into a building, get the right information. It starts with just tenant billing information or energy bills and utility bills, analyzing that data, if possible, to get even better granular data. So the better your building is, the better or more data you can get out of it. The more stringent targets each company sets, the better the quality of the data that you get. Based on that, you set a carbon target as well. And then based on your carbon target, you start reporting. Once you start reporting, as we had already seen previously, that just being able to report the next time you try to improve. And here, once you have started reporting, as we mentioned, you start to improve, or at least start taking action. And by taking action, we mean you use different data analytics method or different EMIS platforms, or softwares or tools or different technologies to be able to analyze the usage of the building through the data that we are gathering. See if there are quick wins that we can have, if there are certain retrofits that can be done. All those different things are then put in place. We verify, we monitor and control, and manage to save energy, and we keep continuing this process. Every time we identify a gap, we identify a problem, we find a retrofit solution for it, or just a basic operational solution for it, monitor and control, and then keep saving energy year on year. After a point, there will be a level where you can't do more than that in terms of bringing in a low carb or a decarbonized space, and that's when the rest of the remaining energy you try to procure from through carbon certificates, etc. But that's basically the last step. But I think the step 4 by itself and step 3 is a continuous loop where we report, take action, reduce energy, report again, and that cycle needs to happen quite a few times until we reach the optimum energy consumption levels. But in order to do all of this, the first step towards is meter data and spreadsheets. So it's kind of boring. It's just Excel sheets and stuff. Excel sheet and not necessarily a lot going on, but that information in itself is quite interesting, and you have a lot of different companies who can cater to that. So who are the people responsible or involved in this whole decarbonization process? In order to understand that, we need to understand what are the different data we are using to be able to comply, data that is available, and how it's used in the building. So for that, we need to understand the technology behind it, and which is the energy management information systems. So to comply with EU taxonomy, energy management system installation and maintaining it for a decarbonized space is becoming the norm. And there are different data sources that can help us with it, or helps an energy management information system with it. So it starts with utility bills, interval meters, weather stations, etc. As you can see, it all goes into the independent data layer that we say, or data warehouse. This is a great graphic. You can always look into, been provided by LBNL, the government website in the US that works with energy, Berkeley Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory. So as you can see here, according to the diagram, you have these kind of different data sources, and it goes into a single independent data layer, typically that we use in the vendor space, but you can also call it like one single data warehouse. And then there are different kinds of, or different levels of EMIS capabilities that this data warehouse information serves towards. It starts with monthly data analytics. You can really start with your utility bills. You typically also see it for your own homes, that you have these apps that shows data, month-to-month data on how you have used your energy, etc. Then you have of course, interval information systems, where you can you have this interval meter data on a very granular level. You can see per hour data, and then you can map each other. You can do measurement and verification based on that interval data to see, okay, is there like continuous or simultaneous heating or cooling happening? What can we do? That information itself provides right insights that you can take you can take actions based on that, right? So if you have simultaneous heating and cooling, then you can work with the facility managers from this data and ensure that that doesn't happen. Then, of course, you go to a even deeper level, which is fault detection and diagnostics. So basically, by analyzing this detailed hourly meter data, as well as connected information regarding what the supply temperature is, what the walls are doing, what are your pressure values, etc., for your AHU units, etc., and other connected installed systems specifically from the building automation system. These are like input parameters also coming in from the building automation system. You can do fault detection and diagnostics. And that's much more, of course, detailed, where you can get, you go to a granular level of saying which walls need, if you have a valve broken or if something else is going wrong. It is that level of root cause analysis that you do with fault detection and diagnostics. And then in the end, it's all about the automated system optimization. Once you know what kind of faults there are, what are the different kind of diagnostics and measures, you can automate a lot of the controls in the building, and that's where you have the automated system optimization. Now, we don't need all of these different capabilities all the time. It's better that we work through it. It's better that we work through the whole capabilities. So first, already with the monthly data analytics, you can have a lot of information. You can have a lot of benefits or savings just with this, especially for existing buildings or a building that has, is not the most advanced. And then slowly, once you have been able to do a lot more energy saving based on the monthly data analytics. Then you go the next step of energy information systems, and so on and so forth. You move up the ladder once you have fully exploited the benefits of that specific category. And what are the different personas? The different personas here are all these different EMIS systems that you saw, or the capabilities that it has, serves different people. So for example, you have in a building, there are two sets of people. There are people who are on a portfolio level, like the sustainability managers, data analysts, etc., accounting people, or asset managers, who look at buildings or a group of buildings on a much more macro level. They just need to know what the overall energy consumption is, what they can do with the buildings in their portfolio to ensure that they're meeting the rules, regulations, CSRD and SFDR requirements. And then there are the building level people who are really getting the job done. They are energy engineers or building operators. If something gets broken, they're the ones who are fixing it. They talk day to day. They are the maintenance technician. If the comfort levels are not right, they are the ones who gets addressed or requested by the tenants for help. And they are the ones who are also the ones who are implementing different measures. So for both of these different level of people, they have, as I mentioned, different kinds of different levels of work that they do, or different jobs that they need to get done. And therefore, they also require different parts of the EIMS system and its capabilities. So as you can see here, in order to get a whole decarbonized space, specifically on the site or building level, you need the more advanced capabilities like interval meter analytics, fault detection diagnostics, supervisory controls. Whereas when you're as a portfolio owner or an asset manager who's looking at the overall portfolio of say 100 buildings or 10, then you need much lesser granular data and reporting related to it, albeit it's as important. But then things like utility data analytics, monthly reporting, carbon accounting, ESG reporting are the kind of tools or applications they are looking towards. And therefore, if you have to put it in a pyramid or a hierarchy of needs, this is how it starts to look like. So as I was mentioning, all buildings have utility bills, and it's on a much more macro level. And it's something as a portfolio manager you can immediately start utilizing. Then once you have exploited all the carbon accounting and validation and tenant billing requirements from this level on the lowest one, because every building has utility bills, then you can look into ESG reporting, CSRD, EU taxonomy, utility data analytics. And once that's done, there is a jump that you make towards getting actual work done in a building. And that is for the on-site users, as I was mentioning, using the interval meter data analytics and fault detection. You already find the low-hanging fruit that you can, of energy savings that you can get with the data that you already have. And once that's done, you upgrade, digitize, and decarbonize. And this is what we need to look at. And especially as a buyer in the market, you need to figure out where you fall. Are you more of a portfolio user? Then you try to look for companies that cater to your macro level requirements and needs of ESG reporting, CSRD or EU taxonomy reporting, but also if you are more of a building operator or a facility management personnel, you would be looking into apps or software that can help you in your day-to-day needs, where you don't have to go on site every day, but it can, for example, automate your error detection using fault detection and diagnostics, or automate some of your operational controls using supervisory controls, so that you don't have to be on site every day to make changes for the optimal functioning of your building. What does this? There are different capabilities as well per category of portfolio owners, as well as on a building level, which is the utility bill analytics and metering. But this is something I'll explain later in a different video. But also what's important is to understand that one was looking or choosing the right software as a main user, but also looking at it from a vendor perspective. And when I say looking at it from a vendor's perspective is for companies like us, NextSense, or other companies who are in this space, competing in this market, as to, for us, it is also a question to look into how we can help our customers, what kind of offers do we have towards our client, and how quickly can we become useful to our clients. As NextSense, for example, we do ESG reporting, we do utility analytics. So we do see that we help not only the portfolio users with this macro level data, but we also try to bridge the gap with our own controls and simulation services, which is more geared towards the on-site users. Because again, not only do we do internal meters analytics, but we also do supervisory controls that allows the building operator on site to automate a lot of their controls and services in the BMS system. And also it's important for us to understand how, as sales, from a sales perspective, how do we also bridge the gap, or basically educate our clients to understand that as a portfolio owner, when we go towards our client, that hey, it is useful, this tool or the NextSense, for example, is useful for you for ESG reporting, but make sure that we can also be a tool that helps your facility management to do better. I think this is also a good point to ponder about, or really think about that as a vendor. How can we help portfolio owners to not only help themselves, but also help the on-site users for each of the buildings, so that overall everybody benefits from the purchase of the software, purchase of the software, basically, for their portfolio. Yeah, and that's it. I hope this video helps to clarify some of the doubts or the complexity of this whole energy management market, and how it is designed, and how how basically this whole landscape is positioned, and how different companies are positioned in this building sector. And thanks.